going to begin by saying what this talk is not. This talk tonight on dryness and prayer is not a talk, as I said just a moment ago, on how to avoid dryness and prayer, because dryness and prayer is simply part of the experience of having a prayer life. So there's no magic bullet that if you do this, you'll never experience dryness in prayer, or a lack of consolation, or a lack of feeling. That's simply not real. In heaven, we won't need it. We won't have to worry about dryness, because our experience of Christ will be so full and rich. It's not an issue with dryness. But in our life here, we're going to experience times of great consolation. The feeling of being loved very much by God. There's going to be times when we feel very distant, apart from, or separated. And it's important to sort out what's going on in those situations. It's important for us. It's important to navigate. So what I would hope to do tonight is not so much talk about how to avoid dryness in prayer, but one, how to deal with it when it happens, and B, what it really is all about, or what's happening when we experience these things. But I want to start with the real basic principle. We've always got to keep this in mind when we're thinking about the life of prayer, is that, as I say, prayer is a living relationship. And like human relationships, there's going to be moments in that relationship where it's really easy to love, and moments when it's not as easy, or we're not feeling it. The primary analogy that we always will use, this is the ones the Scripture uses for our prayer life, is that of husband and wife. Married persons who love each other very much. Now, if we take that image, that analogy, that the Scriptures give us again and again and again, to express Christ's relationship to the church, God's relationship to Israel, our relationship to God, the soul's relationship, if we take that seriously, think about it. I'm not married, but I do lots of marriage preparation, and I talk to lots of married couples. And for those who are married, there are moments when it's easy to love your spouse. There are also lots of other moments when it's not so easy to love your spouse. That is to say, when you know you love them, but there's something you're annoyed with, the feeling of love isn't real present or obvious in that particular moment. Okay? My parents always tell the story. When they were doing marriage preparation, many, many years ago, 50 years, some years ago, then the priest told them, no matter how mad you are at night to each other, when you go to bed, you cannot go to sleep without saying, I love you to each other. They told me that story. And I can just imagine there were nights when they were lying in bed like this, I love you too. Now, as I said, the temptation or pitfall we all face is to think that because we value authenticity so much, not a bad thing, but because we value authenticity so much, and then we go to pray, and there are times when we seem to be going through the motions, we're not feeling anything, but we're saying the words, that's inauthentic, and therefore that's kind of hypocritical, and we should back off. Wrong. Like a married couple, you can be mad than heck at your spouse. And you might not be feeling love at that particular moment. But beneath the level of those feelings is a love which is real, which you're not feeling at the moment, but which is there, and which supports and sustains your relationship, even though you're not feeling the affection for your spouse at that particular moment. And that's important. Because if you only said, I love you to your spouse, when you had these feelings of love for your spouse, you wouldn't say it nearly as much as you need to or should. Because there's a distinction between the level of the affections, what we feel, and the level of the will, which is where love really takes its root. Now, there are times when the will to love someone and the feelings go hand in hand. That's great. That's easy. This is easy for young people who are romantic, falling in love with each other. It's easy to love them and to have those feelings go with them. So sometimes the level of feeling and the level of will are congruent and overlap and are doing the same thing. But there are lots of other times where the will wants to love, desires that, but the feelings aren't necessarily following, they're lagging behind, they're just not present. That's true in any human relationship, and friends, that's true also in our relationship with God, what we call prayer. So there's times when we're going to pray, and we'll walk away from feeling any different whatsoever, feeling like it's really hard to get anything out of it, or I'm just not getting anything. That's an important thing to know in our life of prayer. We don't just blow that off and say it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But the challenge is how we respond to that what it's maybe inviting us toward, and how we respond to it. So there's not always a direct correlation between my feelings and my love. Remember that, because in our culture, love is a feeling. How people use the term at least. Love's just a feeling. Now, love can in fact involve feelings, and again, that's great if that can happen, but there are no guarantees. And so it's nice when our affections follow the wake of love, but very often, there's times when we can love but not feel love, and that's okay. Again, that's not a sign that you're necessarily doing something wrong, or that your relationship with God is in jeopardy, or that you're a bad Catholic or a bad Christian. It could mean those things, but it's probably not a symptom of those things at all. Because, friends, just because you're not feeling it doesn't mean you necessarily did something wrong, or that your relationship with God is in jeopardy. There are times when, in a human relationship, there's bumpy roads, and it's just not really an easy time. That doesn't mean that the relationship's over. And certainly from God's perspective, whose love for us is unconditional, his love never changes. We don't have to worry about God being fickle or all of a sudden loving us less. Guess what? We can do that all the time. And each act of ours that's sinful loves something in place of God. That's what sin is. It's loving something or someone in place of God. Myself, my career, my ego, my pleasure, my comfort, my vanity, whatever it is, it's choosing something else in preference to God. God doesn't do that with us. He loves each of us as if there were only one of us. And God's love for us is unconditional. So we never have to worry about that side of the relationship. Unlike a human relationship, where we have two imperfect beings struggling to love one another with their imperfections and despite their imperfections. In our relationship with God, it is a little different. Because the divine lover, God, loves unconditionally. He doesn't play games. He's not insecure. We are. But God's love is right there all the time. And if there's a block to it, it's imposed by us, never by God. God never withholds or holds back his love. We often block it, deflect it, don't notice it, overlook it, any number of things. Now, in the tradition of the church, the feeling of affection and warmth, or however you want to talk about it, it comes with prayer. Sometimes it's called a consolation. Okay? Those are good things. Don't be afraid of them. If it happens, enjoy it. It's meant to give you comfort. It's called it's meant to console. The real root meaning of console really is to make strong. So when you receive these consolations, they're meant to strengthen us. You know? And there's times when we pray and it's easy to pray, and we love to pray, and we get a lot out of our prayer. That's great. Thank God for that. It's a grace. There are going to be other times and other moments when, in fact, it's not so easy to pray. It's hard to stay focused. And we may leave it or walk away from prayer not feeling that much different, or maybe even a little further from God because we didn't really spend as much time, or it just didn't work the way we wanted it to. That's not a consolation. That's, in fact, the dryness we're talking about. But it's not a sign that you're necessarily doing something wrong, God doesn't love you, or that you're a bad Christian. The litmus test of your Christianity, your faith, is not how you feel about God in a particular moment. It's your faithfulness to God no matter what you feel at that moment. And that's what the Lord looks at, is our fidelity. Mother Teresa says that all the time. What God is looking for in us is fidelity. Okay? God's not looking for us always to have warm feelings. And he doesn't promise that if you follow me, I'll give you all kinds of warm feelings. What God promises us is if we're faithful, he's always faithful. If we're faithful, welcome, friends. If it's fidelity that matters. And it's actually that fidelity when it's not easy, which is a real virtue. We'll talk more about that. One of the things that could be going on in these moments of dryness when we pray is that God might, in fact, be inviting us, challenging us a little bit. He, as it were, withdraws himself just a little bit to test what it is that we're really looking for. Okay? Because it's very easy in our relationship with God to think and to really believe that, well, I love God so that, blah, 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 blah. The moment we've added a so that, we've turned our relationship with God not into an end, but into a means. And think about it. What is it that we want from God? We should, in the end, want nothing but God. And if we love God so that we have success in our career, or good health, or a happy marriage, or our kids behave, or any number of things, if we have a relationship with God for those ends, then our relationship with God is just an instrument. It's like using somebody we know to get something else. It's like befriending our neighbor because he's got a riding lawnmower and our yard is big. And you know, like, I love our neighbor Jim. He is awesome. And he's so nice. He lets us use his mower. He's great. We really got to stay on his good side. Why? So I can get the lawnmower. In our relationship with God, part of the challenge of these dryness, moments of dryness, the asperity, the lack of consolation, is precisely to test, wait a minute, it's an opportunity to step back. What is it that I really want? Am I looking for the feelings? Because the feelings aren't God. And if I'm in a relationship with God because God makes me feel good, well, those feelings are going to come and go. And if that's what you want, God's just an instrument to get those feelings. The real end that you're desiring, or that I'm desiring, are those feelings. And there are people who can easily get drawn into religious experiences who, in the early part of their religious life, have deep, personal, warm experiences. And then as they grow and mature, those things don't always happen. And the real test is, well, wait a minute, what are you in this for from the beginning? Were you in it for the feelings or for God? And of course, the only one who can satisfy us, the only one who can fill us, give us life, make us rich, as it were, is God. And we have to be very careful to ask, well, wait a minute, do I pray so that I have these experiences? Maybe the dryness is being given to me to challenge me to think, what is it that I really am doing when I'm trying to pray? Am I really trying to enter into a union with the one I love? Or do I enter into the union with the one I love so that I can feel the experience that gives me? And there's a danger. Even in our human relationships, in a marriage. Do husbands and wives love you? I can't imagine you really ever saying to your spouse, if you really love them, I love you because this, and this, and this, because these things happen to me, because no. In the end, what you really do is you love them. And of course, there's all kinds of things that come as a result of that. But that's not why you love them. You just love them. And by the way, all these other things accrue with that. But the fact of the matter is, it's love between persons is never instrumental. And God is personal. So our love for God is not a means. So it's not like I love God so I get to heaven. Well, that's dumb, really, if you think about it. God's just a stepping stone along the way so I can get to heaven. The real goal is heaven, not God. No, we should love God. Oh, and by the way, if we do, we will experience heaven. That's not an issue. That's not why we love God. We love God because God is love. And there's no other reason. We don't love God because anything. We simply love God. And oh yes, there's things that come as a result of loving God, but that's not what we're doing it for. It's like those, an adolescent relationship with, oh, Billy's got his license now. Billy's a great friend. I love Billy because I can use his car. No, Billy's my best friend. Billy and I are buds. We've always loved each other. We're great. We're almost like brothers. Oh, and now that Billy drives, it's great too. But that's not why I love Billy. I don't love Billy because I can ride in his car. That's the benefit of being a friend of Billy, but I just love Billy for being Billy. And if Billy didn't have a car, I'd love him just as much. That's the thing. If God doesn't give you what you want, you'll love him as much? Or is it that I love God so that, and if God holds anything back from me, back it off. I'll show God I won't love God nearly as much. No. Regardless of what we receive, it should be our love, our friendship that matters. So this is one of the real things that happens in dryness and prayer. It's an opportunity, it's a gut check, as they say. It's an opportunity to say, wait a minute, what is it that I really want? Is it that I want a feeling or an experience or any other thing other than God? Or is this really an opportunity for me to say, wait a minute, I should love God just because I love God, in the same way that I love my friends, not because of what they do for me or could do for me, but because of who they are. And our relationship with God should be the same. So dryness could be a divine cue, a little prompt. The Lord saying, hey, look, you're going to experience this dryness because you need to wake up and realize that our relationship isn't just what you get from it. You should just want to spend time with me because of me, not because of what I get from you. and we're not getting the consolation, there's dryness in our prayer. That also, the spiritual writers tell us, helps purify us, our motives. Why are we praying? Why are we doing this? Again, it's a purification. It's a way of stripping down to the basics. I was thinking the gospel today, the gospel for the day is two miracle stories, one within another, where Jesus, the synagogue official Dryness, comes to Jesus and says, my little girl is dying, please come save her. And then Jesus on the way is this little old lady, well, one gospel she's an old lady, this gospel doesn't say that, but the point is, an old lady with a hemorrhage, she's been chronically ill for years, and she thinks, all I gotta do is touch the gospel. Touch the gospel. I'll be healed. She has that much faith. Jesus, of course, and there's great humor in the gospel. I don't know if you realize it, but okay, this is an image of Jesus mobbed by people. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this massive crowd of people pushing in against him, Jesus says, who just touched me? And the disciples are all like, you've got to be kidding, Jesus. Who just touched you? Like thousands of people just touched you. But he knows what he means, and the woman knows what he means. Like, she knew she was healed. But it's here, faith's what you got when you don't have anything left. Dryness and prayer strips us down so that what we really cling to is just God. That all we've got is God. And we're holding on to God, and that's all we've got. We don't have feelings, we don't have affection right now, but it doesn't matter because we're going to hold on. And what we've got is just God right now. That's all. That's why poverty is so recommended in the Gospels. Because people who are poor, they don't have anything, but they got God. Or they could have God. They don't rely on anything else to prop them up, to make them feel good about themselves, to support them, to find meaning. No, all they've got is God. And poverty of spirit means realizing all we've got is God in the end. I mean, this stuff, none of this matters. In the end, God's not going to say like, this is what's going to make you happy, Heinz, being a priest. No, I love my priesthood. But in the end, the only thing that's going to make me happy is God. Not office, not, influence. It's not pleasure. It's not power. It's not all the stuff that we think we need to prop us up. Poverty of spirit means we're stripped down to nothing but God and us. And we can realize in that moment, this is all I got. And this is all that's promised me. And it should be enough. Mother Teresa always said, who could be more selfish? What could be more selfish than the person for whom God isn't enough? Think about it. We're not happy. We don't want to settle for God. We want God we want God plus a bunch of other stuff. That's the thing. We do. We want God. There's no question. You wouldn't be here tonight. You wouldn't be here. Winter storm warning. Where do you go? Let's go to church tonight. Okay? Now I'll get you out of here before. Well, it's about a foot down right now. Winter storm warning. You're going to come to church. You clearly want God. The problem for all of us is we usually want God and a plus sign. I want God and this and another. It's almost our love is conditional so often. That's the point. Yeah, we love God. It's like we want to enter a prenuptial agreement with God, the divine lover. Like, okay, I'm going to love you, God, and if you don't follow through, I might withdraw my prayer time. First of all, God's going to be wild by that. Like, oh no, I'm God, and I need you to pray to me because I'm needy. No. But it's like putting conditions. Like we don't, and we shouldn't, because God puts no. God loves us unconditionally. Our love is so far from that. But dryness in prayer is the experience of being able to stop and ask ourselves, wait a minute, what is it that I'm really looking for? What is it that I really expect or want? So there's a purification that can happen in these. Now, that's if you use it right. So you don't have to go looking for dryness in prayer. If you've had Linda, if the last 5 months of your prayer life has been rich and consoling and great, by all means, do not go looking for dryness. Enjoy it. So don't think you got to, oh, wow, I should go look for, no, that's crazy. Don't go looking. If you're receiving, if it's easy and you're getting comfort from it, then by all means, keep it up. But there will be a moment, or a day, or weeks, or even months of your life, some of the great saints, it's a long time, of dryness, of distance, of not feeling. John of the Cross calls it the dark night. This feeling of just not having anything. And it's exactly in those moments that what's being revealed to us is what? What's the one thing we need? The one thing necessary? The one thing needful? God. Not all the other stuff that, and again, as Catholics, it's wonderful because our faith is filled with all kinds of tactile dimensions, things that we use as props because we're embodied creatures, the incarnation, the Word was made flesh. It makes sense that in this experience there's all these tactile things that help prop up our faith. But in the end, all they get stripped away. In the dark night of the soul, all it is you and God. And the question is this enough for you? That's a scary question. Because I don't know if I'm strong enough to give the right answer. I hope that my answer is, yes, Lord, you're enough for me. Okay, it's easy to give it as an abstraction right here to say, God, you're enough for me. But in the reality of my concrete life, is that really the truth? And how far do I yet have to go in my conversion to get to the point where I can answer that question honestly and say, yes, Lord, you're enough. Think on these things. This is what that experience of that purification that comes from having to face the fact that in the end, all we're offered by God is God. God doesn't offer us lots of other stuff. It's not like, hey, by the way, your signing bonus with us, you get this, 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 this. There's no signing bonus. You get God. Oh, and by the way, God says, if that's not enough for you, you're on your own. You're not going to be having anything else. So we want God plus. The Lord's saying to us in these moments of dryness, what is it you really want? The other effect is that it strengthens us. Okay? Marriages and other human friendships and relationships which go through a period of testing and trial, dryness or whatever, those marriages can often become much deeper and richer because of that experience. Not that you have to go seeking it. I tell couples who come in for marriage preparation, look, somewhere between 3 and 7 years of marriage, you're probably going to go through a period where it's not easy. And I don't know the nature of that, it doesn't matter because it's going to vary from couple to couple, but just be ready, it's going to happen. I tell them that so that when it does happen, they don't flip out. They don't think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with our marriage. No, this is part of being in a relationship like that. There's going to be testing. And you can look at it as one of two ways. One, an opportunity to bail, which the culture around us encourages people to do right and left. The other is to say, let's work through this together. Let's take our relationship to a deeper level. Now, the challenge, as many of you know, is that it takes two people to do that. So oftentimes in these situations, one spouse may be really willing to work with it, make it happen, and the other is just not interested, and we can't fix that. But if a couple knows that we're going to face some daunting times, and we use this time as an opportunity to take our relationship to a deeper level, that's what can happen to us in the prayer life. We can look at these dryness, okay, this is a relation time, gut check time. Do I really want to take this relationship with the Lord to a deeper level, or do I want to cut and flee? Just cut bait and get out of here. That's what the evil one wants us to do, to bail. To think like, well, I want to be authentic about this, so until I have those feelings again, I'm really not going to enter into prayer. Well, who wins then? That's like the rhododendron deciding that, you know what, I'm tired of these cloudy days. I'm just going to go live in a closet. And then when it dies and withers up because it's not experienced sunlight, whose fault is that? It's our own. We withdraw from God, the very source of our life, in the name of authenticity, when in fact the Lord's inviting us to ride through this difficulty. He will discipline you and make you stronger. Because the virtue that comes from this kind of experience, the virtue that's really inculcated during these moments of dryness, fidelity. Fidelity. Being faithful, even when it's not easy to pray, even when we're not getting anything out of it. That's, you think about it, a parent gets up, I just am all parents getting up at 2 in the morning, changing a dirty diaper, got a colicky kid screaming for 4 hours that night, you get about 30 minutes of sleep. That to me is heroic virtue. And why do they do it? Is a parent getting a darn thing out of that? Absolutely not. They do it because they love. And there are times when they do it with grit teeth and out of a sense of pure duty and fidelity, but they do it. Our spiritual lives are different life. That's actually love that's motivating that kind of fidelity. It may not sound romantic. I'm sure for those of you who've done this, and many of you have, middle of the night, no sleep. For many of you who've done that, you don't do it because it's heroic or romantic. You do it because you gotta do it, and you love your kid. And you don't feel like you're loving your kid as you're changing the diaper at 2:30 in the morning. You're barely awake. But that's exactly, so there's the difference with the level of your feelings and the level of your will. The will is you love your baby. That child means so much to you. And you would be very happy never to have to change another diaper the rest of your life. but you do it because you're faithful. So the fruit that comes from riding through these moments is faithfulness. Okay. We don't want to give up, like I said, or just withdraw from prayer out of the guise of authenticity. And so, one of the things that fidelity means, in a sense, riding through these moments. Now, what can help, this isn't what always helps, but what can help, friends, is what I call rearrange your spiritual furniture. Okay? We get into habits where we pray at certain times of the day, we have certain types of prayer that appeal to us, certain types of prayer that are easier than others, and we do those things. That's great. My goodness, that's a wonderful thing. But as you and I know, routines are good, rote things can be bad. And very often, one of the things I invite you to think about is if your prayer experience is going through dryness, ask yourself, in terms of the ways I pray and the times I pray, am I just in a rut? Because sometimes prayer routines, which are good, can become prayer ruts, which are often not so good. And so when I say rearrange spiritual furniture, I'm the kind of person, I'm kind of a neat freak anyway, but every now and again, just to get a different take on something, I rearrange furniture in the room. Because when you walk into a room that's been rearranged, it feels like a new place. And it's like a fresh start. Okay? And so rearranging furniture is one of my therapy for coping with, getting a fresh start. In the middle of February when everything's dark and cold, okay, rearrange your furniture. It really does, there's work involved in it, but the after, you're like, oh, this is awesome. Do the same thing with your spiritual furniture, so to speak. That is to say, look at your practices and kind of evaluate. I've kind of been doing the same kind of prayer routine, okay, for a long time. And right now I'm going through a period of dryness. I'm not suggesting you don't pray. What I'm suggesting is you kind of shake it up a little bit. Pray in new ways or in new times or in new places. Or go back to old ways, old times, and old places that worked for you previously. When a couple comes in, they've been married 15 years, and they're like, yeah, we just don't seem to have the spark in our marriage we used to have. One of the things I'll ask is, when you first fell in love and started dating, where did you like to go on a date? Oh, we used to love to go to Bonnie Doon. That was so awesome. You go to Bonnie Doon. Okay, when was the last time you went to Bonnie Doon? Oh, it's been years. Okay, well, guess what? Go back there. Go back to the places you fell in love. I go back to the parish I grew up in Elkhart, and I always feel like a little charged when I go in there. Because that church, I remember all the times I was in that church praying as a kid, and I go to the little pew I used to sit in, and I sit down there, and I'm flooded with memories, mostly positive, of all the experiences I had in that place. If you grew up in a parish in town that's around, and you haven't been there a long time, you're looking to recharge your batteries, go back to that church. Breathe in the incense and the beeswax and that smell that Catholic churches have. Suck it all in. Allow those things to rekindle your experience of prayer. Maybe that's the solution. So change up the ways, the times, and the places. Either new ones or go back to old ones that worked before. See if that helps. It may not be an immediate fix, but it's a way of keeping yourself honest so that by rearranging your practices a little bit, like let's say, for example, boy, it's been years since I even tried to pray the rosary. Well, guess what? Maybe that's a great way to change up your prayer routine. Or maybe you've never tried something like Lectio Divina, prayerfully reading passages of the Scriptures. Maybe this is a way to try to change your prayer life up. Add some new dimension. Try something new. But the key thing is, don't do this hodgepodge where you're doing 6 different things every day for 7 days. That's just going to lead to confusion. The key thing is to pick a practice or two, fix a time or two, and then stick with it for a while. Give yourself a couple of weeks of doing it to see if it makes a difference. It'd be like the doctor said to me, like, okay, you got to get into better shape, so I want you to go to the gym once a month for half an hour. Okay? Do you think there'd be any difference at all? No. But if he says, okay, I need you to do this, 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 and you got to do it faithfully and regularly, do it for 3 weeks and let me know what you think. I tell you, you'll see a difference. But you got to stick with it and you got to be faithful to it. Don't keep changing it up. Even if it's not easy, write it out for those 2 weeks or whatever. Try a new practice or a new time or a new place and see if it helps. But you're not going to know that after a day or two. It's going to take a couple of weeks of doing it that way and see if it makes a difference. Okay? So you praise the sales, or the salt, as they say. whose marvelous little book, The Introduction to the Devout Life, I reread it at Christmas time. It's really a great book. I'm thinking of doing a Lenten series on it. It's written in 1608, and yet some of the practical insights in this book are just phenomenal. He talks about dryness, and he makes some suggestions. He says, okay, first of all, be grateful that you can even pray. That's a gift, that's a grace. Even if you don't feel anything, the fact that you can turn to God, that you have faith, that's itself a grace. Okay? The other thing, he says, he's going to give you suggestions. First, go back to basic vocal prayers. Instead of trying to do some kind of deep, meaningful experience of prayer, say form prayers. Prayers you learned as a kid. Try that. He says, that might shake it up enough. That might give you something new to chew on. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love committed. Okay, try that. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never, try prayers that you might not have said for a long time that you know of. He says that's the first thing. Because that at least is prayer. You're talking to God. It may not be the kind of experience you expect or would want, but there's faithfulness in it. Say first. Go back to basic prayers. Secondly, use a crucifix, an icon, or some other vision or image to kindle your imagination. Okay? If you're really in a rut, and you're really not praying well, it might be worth running over to Aquinas, buying a small little icon or image that you think is beautiful, and try praying with it. Allow yourself to be drawn into the scene, whatever it is from the gospel or whatever. Just picture yourself and use your imagination. Your imagination is not an impairment necessarily. It can be a huge help in your life of prayer. So don't be afraid of using visual, because that's my suggestion of going to the church you grew up in. And sit down in the pew and take it all in again. Or maybe visit a church in South Bend you've never been to. And it looks beautiful. It's like, man, go into that church and sit down and see if maybe looking at the beautiful windows or the crucifix or whatever it is, you can pray better. Try that. Third thing, find spiritual reading. Enrich or kindle your faith. He says, how many of you, when I grew up, this is so funny, this has always meant so much to me as a kid. One of my favorite things reading when I was growing up was Lives of the Saints. That was a huge, I remember that little yellow book by Lawrence Lavisick, okay, that had one of the weirdest art in it, pictures of saints' faces. I still think, when I was a kid, the picture of St. Rita, I swear it was a dude. Okay, as a kid, I was looking and thinking, that looks like a man. That face, oh my gosh, it scared me. I was like, she looks like a guy. No, that's what I remember about the book. But I read those little snippets of the lives, and then I had another book, 57 Lives of Saints. It was a kid's book, but that was one of those formative experiences. And in fact, this is the stories of Ignatius Loyola and others whose faith lives are kindled by reading Lives of the Saints. Go back, get a good book on the lives, or find a book about a saint. Read it. See if that kindles your life. Finally, Francis says, try some exterior form of devotion. Actually do something bodily different. He suggests prostrating yourself to pray. Now, some of us need a crane to get back up, but, he suggests prostration. Or maybe if you haven't knelt, try kneeling. Or maybe he suggests this. When we see people do this in church, what does it usually mean? Yeah, come up for a blessing. This is actually an ancient penitential gesture. Believe it or not, in the Roman canon, when the priest usually, at that point when the priest bows, may your angel take your sacrifice to your altar in heaven, so that we are, in the old Roman rite, the priest was to do this when he bowed. It's a penitential gesture. And so he suggests trying this. He says, now, you don't want to do this like in public. So he's not suggesting, go to University Park Mall, start prostrating yourself, and walking around doing this. But he says, as you pray, or maybe he says, embrace the crucifix, or an image of the saint. Physically involve your body in your spiritual life. It might help. He says there are no guarantees or promises for any of these things. These are concrete things he suggests to help rekindle when you're going through a period of dryness. I'm going to have the last word, because my suggestion isn't really from Francis, and it's really not that original, but I think it's important to remember. I was talking to someone, a young person today, 20-something young, that's young to me, about prayer. And the most important is someone who's just learning how to pray, just learning to become a Christian. Really interesting story, great kid. At any rate, one of the things I said, we got to remember with prayer, We often sit down and we think we're going to start. But the first act of prayer, in many ways, is not to say or do, but to begin by receiving. That is, we wouldn't be able to sit down and pray at all if we were not, in that very moment, loved by God. That's simply a fact. That's a theological truth. If you deny it, you're a heretic. You and we exist by God's loving will. So that before we begin to do anything in our prayer, it's good to stop and simply receive. To realize, in this very moment, God is loving me absolutely and unconditionally. And to begin by receiving that love before you do a darn thing else. And then prayer is easy because all you're doing is giving back that love, returning it. Thank you, and return it. But most of us do. We sit down with our little agenda. This is what I'm going to do when I'm going to pray. I sit down, I've got my little prayer book, I've got my rosary, I've got everything. I'm ready to go. Okay, God, hey, hold on. No. It's my time. We get ready and we're going to do it. Now, those aren't bad things at all. But there's something prior. The famous line in the first letter of St. John. This is what love consists in. Not that we've loved God. God's loved us. That's the starting point. Prayer that doesn't begin with that kind of receptivity is missing out huge. It starts with receiving that love. And just sitting in it for a moment. Just sit in that love. Just realize you're sitting there. You're not in a hurry. You know what? Just let God love you. Just sit there and be overwhelmed by that experience of God's love for you. Again, St. Augustine says, as if you were the only creature that ever existed. See, our love, we think it was like a commodity, so we break it up. 20% of my love goes here, 40% there. God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. And I think the Kyrie of Ars says if we really realized how much God loved us, we'd die of fright. We'd be overwhelmed. And it is overwhelming if you actually think, I want to receive God's love. And you don't have to want it because it's coming to you anyway. But to be open to it, to be aware, right now. And this is another, you can also hold the people that matter to you in that love, because he's loving them too. Maybe you have a child who's far from home, maybe you've got someone in your family who's ill, maybe you've got someone who's estranged from you, and you love them but they're estranged from you. Hold them and let God love them too. And just realize, in this very moment, and even better, in all those moments when I'm not paying attention, God's loving me. All prayer is doing is stopping from it and realizing, oh, you know what? This morning when I was brushing my teeth, God was loving me. I was in the shower, God was loving me. When I was driving, God was loving me. And in prayer, all we're doing is stopping and, holy cow, this happens. God, stop. And then to hold all those. So, that might be another way of trying to overcome dryness, is by realizing before you even start to do anything in prayer, to receive. Does this help? Questions, comments, expressions of outrage? I'll be on WNDU tomorrow night. You can turn it on, I'm kidding. I'll have local access cable with Wayne's World. I do recommend, it's inexpensive. The book is $15 American, $20 for Canadian. Introduction About Life. Like I said, I think during Lent I'm going to do a series on this book. We'll read it together and talk about it. It's funny, I read it when I was in high school. I was a weird kid. Read it when I was in high school, read it again when I was in seminary, and then read it this last week. And it's amazing when you read a book at different points in your life, what happens to you. Like I read the same book 3 times, but 3 very different experiences. So don't think because you read something a long time you shouldn't go back to it. But this is a book that's very readable. It's addressed to a woman who had come to, well, it's not actually a woman. There are lots of people who came to her spiritual direction. It's actually addressed to Philothea, a made-up name, as if it's a letter to her, a series of letters telling her what to, and when he talks about the devout life, all he's talking is holiness of life. He's just saying, oh, by the way, the great thing about this book is it was written in 1608. And in 1608, most people thought, well, holiness, that's what cloistered sisters and monks do. But then there's the rest of us, we're kind of hikers and slackers. We're never going to get to heaven, but maybe we'll get to purgatory, and maybe the prayers of someone good will help me. But they didn't expect much of themselves. The bar was so low for themselves. And basically, Francis is like, no. The bar is being raised. You're called to the same holiness too. It'll look different in your life because you're married or divorced or widowed or whatever, but it's the same holiness. He calls it devotion. He means holiness in life. So, at any rate, great little book. Be careful going home. Thanks for coming tonight. Pray for me. Thank you. Thanks, Marianne, for filming this. This will be on the website at some point. If you really can't sleep some night, you can turn it on. Right over. If you're distracted, I kept trying to pray, but your video kept showing up.